Take the exit. Turn right into the drive-thru.
Nope, I'm making dinner tonight.
You don't have time. Josh has practice.
Oh, that's right. I'll just get a salad.
And fries?
No, just the salad.
But salad cancels fries.
Salad only.
Fries.
Salad.
Fries.
Food noise isn't fair, but Mochi Health is. The affordable GLP-1 source that puts you on the road to successful weight loss.
Hey, can I get the...
Fries.
Salad. Sorry.
Learn more at joinmochi.com. Mochi members have access to licensed physicians and nutritionists. Results may vary.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Make another smart choice with Auto Quote Explorer to compare rates from multiple car insurance companies all at once. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
All right, so we're back again, and we have two familiar faces that have been on the podcast before regarding the Steve McNair case. We have Vincent Hill, and we have Keith Norflet. So, guys, like I said earlier, just before we started, I wanted to get you guys together after speaking with both of you as we dive deeper into this case to try to see what went wrong. Why is this still lingering? Why is there still a lot of questions? Why does it still seem so unsettled for, not for law enforcement, obviously, but for a lot of the people associated with it? So wanted to bring you guys together because you guys connected. I want to find out when you guys connected and then what, at this point in the case, so many years later, where you think it is, where do you think it could possibly go? Is this something that, people are just continually to just bury just because there's probably too many unhinged, unpopular, deep, dark secrets that may it unearth and leave people vulnerable because there is a lot of money associated with all of this, and the public, I feel, still needs some answers. So, Vincent, I'll start with you. When did you first learn about Keith, and when did you first speak to him? And tell us a little bit about that background.
Yeah. So, as far as when we first spoke, you have to forgive me. I always tell people I forgot more about this case than most people ever knew. But I do remember hearing Keith's name, immediately in the investigation. There was talks around Nashville that Keith may have had something to do with this. I never believed it. There was a whole incident of a rap song I believe he did shortly before this all happened that people were trying to say tied into what happened to Steve and Jenny. But for me personally, I just never believed Keith, who would have not had a motive for one, and B, had an airtight alibi, had anything to do with what happened to Steve and Jenny.
Yeah.
I think that's really important to understand because immediately everybody blames the ex-boyfriend, husband, wife, or whatever without really even knowing any of the information. And it seems like that happened to you, Keith, like right away.
Immediately. It was instantaneous. And like I said before, I had almost no time to even grasp what had actually happened before the accusations started flowing in, and I had to start defending myself instead of being able to have any kind of time to grieve at all.
So, Vincent, independent of the alibi, before you knew about that, what was it about Keith's story that didn't ring true to you?
I mean, how would he have gone into a condo, undetected essentially, shot Steve 4 times, shoot Jenny in the head, and then get out of there without leaving a trace, without, leaving some kind of sign behind that, yeah, I had something to do with this. And I'll go back a few days before that, when Jenny was arrested for the alleged DUI, and I say alleged because I don't think she was intoxicated. Keith probably would have had an opportunity then to voice his frustration or then to do something with that. But when you listen to how that went down, there was just not that anger there that would then escalate him to committing a double homicide.
Yeah. Now it's pretty bizarre. But like statistically though, I mean, we've covered cases like this before. it's usually someone who's very close to the victim. So like I can understand why law enforcement would gravitate to that, because it's never usually a stranger. It's always someone they know, and if there's a romantic linkage. So I can understand where they go. But it's like they did their due diligence looking out for people that were close to Jenny, but it almost like they dropped the ball on the people that were really close to Jenny.
Well, I mean, Keith had an alibi. He was at work, and there was people, the witnesses, and all of that should have been taken care of immediately, not 30 days later.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. And not only that, I refreshed my memory before we jumped on this call, because again, I have Jenny's cell phone record. Keith texted her after the time she would have been dead, right? So that just doesn't line up with, I did this, and now I'm going to text her, just to see how she's doing. It just doesn't line up.
Yeah. So Keith, how did that make you feel when they finally kind of realized that you were out of the crosshairs of law enforcement?
At that moment, it was more like there was a sense of relief, but I think that I kind of drew that energy more so from my family and friends, because as soon as that was actually out of the way, then everything else just immediately started to sink back in. And it was excruciating, actually. I mean, because regardless of the fact that, I had been cleared and that was no longer an issue, it wasn't bringing Jenny back. It wasn't bringing Steve back. It wasn't getting rid of what had just occurred in the first place. And that, just the realization of this is all really happening. This is all real. And the way that I had to really let it was coming and going, with all of the chaos that was going on at the time. I would be lying if I said that I was happy or anything of that nature. I was relieved. There was a sense of relief, but I was absolutely devastated immediately thereafter, because I still had to deal with what was actually going on at the time.
Yeah.
You know what I just thought of in this exact moment to tell you how botched this investigation is? If Nashville police believe Keith had something to do with this in the first initial days, and then by July 8th, the day of the press conference, call this a murder-suicide. How do you go from, we're investigating this as a double homicide, to it's murder-suicide and case closed, right? So that tells you that, A, the investigation was botched, and B, they wanted to clear this up as quickly as possible because of the name Steve McNair. If it was just Jenny Kazemi, who no one knew about, they'd probably still be investigating this case. But since it was Steve, we got to get answers. We got to do it quick. Well, this guy has an airtight alibi, so now what do we do? Let's call it a murder-suicide.
Well, that's the thing. And then they waited like a month to clear him publicly, which is kind of ridiculous to me. I mean, and that's where all the speculation comes up. I mean, I understand why, Keith, that they would have looked at you, right? I get that. I understand.
Yeah, I do. I do.
Steve was your idol. She was dating your idol. There was a lot of frustration and things. But from what you have told us and from what we've researched, that there was no violent behavior in the past. You didn't have a history of abusing her or physically being violent or with anyone else. And like Vincent said, where's the evidence that would have led to them coming to the assumption that you were the one responsible for this? And clearly they didn't, if 4 days later they're calling it a murder-suicide. That's a big jump.
It really is. And also, not to mention the fact that they never brought up the fact that I was being 100%, actually 110% cooperative with them at the time. None of this was ever mentioned. It was always perceived that I was trying to lay low and fly under the radar, and I would delete my socials because of threats and such. But they thought that I was seemingly running. But the police, if they had communicated to the public properly, they would have known that I was cooperating to the furthest extent that I possibly could. And I mean, I went to them before they actually came to me and provided all kinds of things that they didn't even know, as well as giving them my cell phone for 2 days straight. I mean, if I had any kind of thing to do with this at all, why would I be so eager to help, to assist, to provide things that they desperately needed at the time? It makes no sense. Not to mention, you got they're coming at me like, full fledged. But a lot of what was misunderstood at the time was there were more than one people here, more like that were very close to her at the time that they were also looking into, but it was just me. They were only bringing my name up.
Yeah, well,
And
you're the sexy headline. That's why it's and it's an easy, round peg fit in the round hole,
Right.
and
Well, also, who else were they looking at that was close to her?
Well, I mean, you had once they got their phone records. Me and Vincent has talked about this numerous times. I mean, there was literally a man that she had been texting more than anyone that was in her phone records that literally had texted her. Well, Vincent knows the numbers much better than I do, but they were texting a lot all the way up until her passing.
Yeah.
And his name was never brought up until I didn't even know he existed until, way late.
Yeah.
Vincent, who are we talking about?
I believe he's talking about Adrian Gilliam. Keith, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things he said, Keith just said, that makes perfect sense to suggest he had nothing to do with it. He went to police immediately, handed over his phone. The one person that did not do that is Adrian Gilliam. Police had to go find him when they associated the gun at the crime scene with him. Like, you have to go back to, if I had nothing to do with this, and I know it's Steve McNair, and I know how big this case is, I'm not going to wait for police to find me. I'm going to do like Keith did, going down to the station. Hey, here's what I know about that investigation. I sold the gun to this young lady who I've never met before, which is probably what he would have said either way you go. But when you look at his phone records and you look at their history, we know that's a lie. But if he had nothing to do with this, he would have gone to police immediately. They wouldn't have tracked him down 2 days later.
Yeah, that's interesting. So the phone records has Adrian Gilliam up until what time are they texting till they?
Well, he actually texted her 2 days after the bodies were found. I think why he did that was to suggest he didn't know anything about it, because Nashville police talked to him on that Sunday after the murders. So the day after they were found, he tells them, well, they say to him, we're here to talk to you about a gun used to kill Steve McNair. They never mentioned Jenny's name. Oh, I sold it to some girl. I don't know her name. They show him a picture, not a 6-person lineup. They show him a picture of Jenny. Is this the girl you sold the picture to? This is Sahel Kazemi. Yep, that's the girl I sold the picture to. They still never once told him.
They saw the picture.
The gun.
Go ahead, the gun. Can you say that
Right.
again? Just say gun.
Right. They never told him she was dead, although the world knew it by then, because this is Sunday. This is the day after. So what he does, he goes and texts her sometime Monday morning. I'd have to get the phone records to be exact. And he just sends her a blank text to suggest, well, if I would have known she was dead, why would I text her? And since they didn't ask if she was, they didn't mention she was dead. Oh, here's my chance to set up my alibi. Like, I didn't know anything about it. I texted her, the day after you guys talked to me. So, yeah, the only thing Adrian Gilliam was ever truthful about was his name. That's it. Everything else he said about this case is a bold-faced lie that you can contradict very easily through phone records, through other witness statements. It's not rocket science.
So just to refresh everybody's memory about Adrian Gilliam, just tell us a little bit about his relationship with Jenny.
So that's questionable. I think we've all questioned what his true relationship was, because I've talked to many of her friends, Jenny's friends, who were really close with her, Emily, Latricia, Courtney. They all said they didn't know who Adrian Gilliam was, right? They said he wasn't the type of guy Jenny would have hung around with, which makes sense. If you're dating an NFL player and you have access to other NFL players, why would you date this bum that supposedly just sells cars on the side? Me personally, it's no secret Jenny had marijuana in her system when she passed. Me personally, I think Adrian Gilliam may have been that connection to get her marijuana. And then when you look at some of the times of the texts and the phone calls, and this is a guy who supposedly had a fiance at home, but when there's a female texting you at 2, 3 in the morning, if your fiance doesn't know about it, she's stupid. And if she does know about it, she knows his business. So me personally, I think Adrian Gilliam may have been her supply for, marijuana here and there on the side. And then the day of the murders, I think something happened between them two, because the amount of phone calls and texts almost tripled in the hours leading up to the homicide.
Wow. Now, Keith, did you have any idea who this Adrian Gilliam was? I mean, because obviously there was like, you guys were at some point, you guys were still living together, even though you kind of broken up, and before you made the official split. Did that ever? Because I can't imagine she was buying weed from him. It didn't just happen overnight, and it sounded like they had, based upon all these text exchanges and the amount of them, that she had probably had a relationship with, like a dealer person relationship with him, probably when she was still with you.
Well, no, one thing I can clarify is the fact that when she did, and I did actually have an encounter with her well after the fact that she had moved out, where I did, for the first time ever, see her actually smoking, and it was weed. We had actually ended up reacquainting after the fact that she had moved out. And I think Emily her roommate at the time had went back to visit her family, I think back in Pennsylvania. And there was discussions going on at the time about Emily possibly moving back to Pennsylvania, which was going to leave Jenny in a pretty difficult position, but not in a position that she wouldn't be able to figure out. I mean, she was fine financially. Me and Vincent Hill has talked about this numerous times. We know, she was not in a down spiral financially or anything like that. She had many options. And I can honestly say that at the time, I was one of them. When we got reacquainted, she had just popped up a couple of times where I was staying, and we started talking again, and talking led to hanging out led to me going over to her apartment, and I went over there numerous times. And that was when I actually discovered her smoking one night. We were actually supposed to go see a movie, and when she didn't answer my text while I was at work, I decided to swing by her apartment to see if she was at home. Now, I can't recall the specific day. There was a lot of things that were happening at the time, but this was, I would say, maybe a week, a little bit more before all of this occurred. And I drove up to her apartment, and she was out on the balcony with a man, and they were smoking together. Now, I don't know if that was him, but I do assume that it probably was. And because I had never seen him before, and I had never met that guy before, but he did look very similar to what I could see in the shadows of him standing on the balcony. Did fit the description pretty well of what he looks like and what I've seen of him online. Now, I haven't met him in person or anything of that nature, but no, that was the first that I had ever possibly come in remotely close contact with him. But outside of that, no, I didn't know of him, and I didn't know that she was smoking until I actually pulled up that day and smelled it on her when she came down.
Yeah, was that the same apartment complex that when you talked to the neighbor who told you that she would see McNair coming in and out of there a lot?
Yes, it was Cherry Creek apartment.
Vincent, did you talk to any of the neighbors there in your investigation? And did they talk about Gilliam at all?
I did talk to Reagan, I believe was her name. Again, I've forgotten more about this case than people heard. Jenny's neighbor. She didn't mention Gilliam. She did, however, mention someone else who's heavily involved in this case, Robert Gaddy, showing up there frequently, if you will, to go in. And she did mention shortly before this took place, the homicides, that Jenny and a heavyset guy, who she basically described to a T of Robert Gaddy, had gotten into an argument outside the apartment. she doesn't remember what the argument was about. She just knows it was heated. And she did say that Jenny, ran inside the apartment out of fear of this heavyset individual. And a couple of weeks later, Jenny and Steve are both killed. So you have to take into account every aspect of a homicide when you're investigating a homicide. When you're talking to neighbors who say, oh, there were people here early that morning taking stuff out of the apartment. This is before the bodies are even found. Why is that not investigated? Why is that? Oh, it's still a murder-suicide. Well, you can't say it's a murder-suicide if you have people inside Jenny's apartment removing stuff before the bodies are even found, right? So,
well, that's what I was going to ask you, because Keith told us that he went to that apartment with his sister and the door was open,
right,
and that she poked her head in and saw that the place was ransacked.
Mm-hmm.
So that was before the bodies were even found?
Yes, because the neighbor, when I interviewed her, she told me, she said it was early that morning, maybe around 9 or 10, something like that. People were at Jenny's apartment removing stuff and, ransacking it and leaving the clothes and a bunch of other stuff. So by the time Keith gets there with his sister and sees the door open, it's like, wow, what happened? We know Jenny didn't open the door, right? She's, miles away laying on the floor dead. So who went inside this apartment? And more importantly, like, why did they not pull surveillance from the apartment complex to say, all right, these are the people that went in? Why didn't they go interview those people? Get a license plate? All these things that were kind of just brushed under the rug to make it fit this narrative. You have to wonder why Nashville police would do that.
Were you ever able to get the surveillance from that apartment complex?
No. Without a subpoena, it's hard to, you know what I mean? It's hard to get stuff like that.
Well, I just thought maybe one of the neighbors might have said, hey, look, I had this on my Ring camera or something.
But I think this is the advent before Ring was a thing, right? Because this is 2009. So, but again, if I couldn't get it, you would assume Nashville police would get it, right? That they would.
Well, yeah, of course.
Well, I mean, the thing that really boggles my mind is that you have all this stuff. I mean, did the police know that Jenny's apartment was ransacked?
They knew because the neighbor told them.
Okay.
It's actually in one of their supplement reports that says the neighbor mentioned, someone going inside Jenny's apartment and taking stuff out. So yes, they knew. So how is that not an avenue to this investigation?
So a few weeks earlier, this man, say his name again, Robert Gaddy, is that his name?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
He was seen kind of intimidating Jenny. Can you tell us who he is in relation to Steve and this whole puzzle?
Well, he was.
I know, but I just want people to understand.
So Robert Gaddy went to college with Steve at Alcorn State. He tried to make it big in football. He didn't make it that big. He played on. Keith will have to tell me the name. What was it? The Nashville Cats, I think. One of the
Nashville Cats, yeah.
Yeah. But he was kind of like Steve's quote unquote bodyguard when Steve was out in town. And then the two started a restaurant together called Gridiron 9, maybe a month or two before Steve was killed. So he was also Steve's business partner. But in interviews that Emily gave to police, Sahel's nephew gave to police, a few other people gave to police, Robert Gaddy had stolen about $13,000 from Steve in the restaurant to go start a new business venture. And then that created some internal beef between those two. In fact, Steve's mother told me about this because she said that was one of the last conversations she had with Steve a few days before he died about Gaddy stealing this money. And Gaddy allegedly, I should say, steals $13,000 from Steve. And then they get into this beef, and about a week and a half, 2 weeks later, Steve's dead. And if you go back and listen to Robert Gaddy's interrogation, I won't even call it interrogation, interview the day of the murders with police, he mentions how, well, if I hadn't, me and Steve hadn't had a falling out, I would have been there. And then what was the falling out? Well, it really wasn't a falling out. I wanted to start a new business venture, and Steve told me to wait, and I didn't, so he got mad. Translation, I stole this $13,000 to go start this club I wanted to start. And Steve found out, and we had a falling out. But again, they never looked into that. You had several independent people telling police the exact same thing about this money being stolen just a week or two before Steve's dead. And again, it's a murder-suicide. It's a murder-suicide.
Yeah, it's crazy what you're saying, all of this, because all these things should have been looked into, right? I mean, isn't that a homicide investigation? You look into every single lead, especially in a case this big, this high profile. You would think they would not leave any stone unturned for you to have to do an investigation, and for you, Keith, to have to dig into this after the fact to figure out what could have possibly happened. So let's go back for a second. So Adrian Gilliam is saying, they're saying that this gun that they found in the apartment was sold to Jenny by this man, Adrian Gilliam, right? Now, Keith, did Jenny ever fire a gun, hold a gun, use a gun? Is this something that she ever talked about doing in the 5 years that you were with her?
Never, not once from the moment that I met her to the last time that I spoke to her did she ever bring up even wanting to have a gun. I had actually, when we lived together, we had experienced like, some things that would go on in our apartment complex and stuff like that. But I had brought up the fact of possibly getting one just for protection. She didn't want to do that because she didn't like the idea of it. From my knowledge and eyewitness, there was never a chance that she even had an opportunity away from me when we were together to even hold a gun, let alone fire one. I had no knowledge whatsoever of her ever having any experience of even handling one in the past.
Well, the other thing I want to ask is, like, real quickly, is that, Adrian Gilliam is a known felon. He spent time in prison.
Yep.
What does he have any business not only possessing a gun, which you're not allowed to possess? I don't know in Tennessee what the Tennessee laws are, but most states, if you're a known felon, you can't own a firearm, let alone one that's not registered, and then he's selling them to people.
Well, here's his story. And yes, he was a convicted felon of murder and armed robbery in Florida. His story is he bought it from a guy named Dwayne Pegues. Dwayne actually purchased it from a pawn shop in Nashville, which is how Nashville police trace the serial number. They then go to Dwayne to say, hey, your gun was found at this crime scene where Steve was killed. Oh, I sold it to Adrian Gilliam for $100 a couple of years ago. They leave Dwayne's house, head over to Gilliam's house, and I guarantee this is how the phone call went. Hey man, police are on the way. I told them I sold you that gun for $100 2 years ago. And I've listened to the recorded interview. That's exactly what he said. And then what does Adrian Gilliam tell police about 20 minutes later? I sold it to some girl for $100. So I say that to say this. He didn't get the gun legally. He had a buddy buy it from a pawn shop, and then his buddy sold it to him because he is a convicted felon of murder and armed robbery. So the whole thing about he sold the gun, that was planted in his head when Dwayne called him after Nashville police left his house and said, I sold it for $100 to my guy, Adrian. And he says the exact same thing. I sold it for $100 to a girl. I don't even know her name, right? And you got to think, he says he needed the $100 because he was, so hard up for money. Even in 2009, $100 is not going to get you much. Now, here's a guy who has seen Jenny drive an Escalade, a Navigator. I know she drove Steve's Mercedes-Benz because when her sister picked up her property, the key to Steve's Mercedes was in there. So you mean to tell me this guy has seen her drive all these $100,000 cars, and the only thing he's going to ask for her for this gun is $100? No. And let me back up to something Keith just said about Jenny owning a gun. Go back and listen to what Gaddy said during his interrogation. When they asked, does Steve keep any guns in the house? Yeah, he keeps a Glock. Guess what police found at the condo? Steve's Glock, fully loaded. So if Jenny wanted to kill Steve, she didn't need to even involve Adrian Gilliam because there's a gun accessible to her by the guy she allegedly killed before she killed herself. So this whole thing about a gun sale, the only person who ever mentioned a gun sale is Adrian Gilliam. You know why? Because he knows she can't say, no, that's bullshit. He knows Steve can't say, no, that's bullshit. They're not here to say it. He said it.
Yeah. Hey, do you have, I mean, are these recordings from these interviews, or are they just transcripts you have?
I have both.
Okay, great.
I can quote word for word.
Yeah. Well, okay. We'll talk about that
Yeah.
after. But so it's just astonishing to me that they had someone who was a convicted felon of murder and another state, and they didn't pursue him as the suspect immediately once they found out that he was connected to that gun.
Well, here's the thing. They didn't know he was a convicted felon of murder and armed robbery until like a week later when the ATF called Nashville police and they're like, hey, by the way, the guy who says he sold the gun, you do realize he's a convicted felon of murder and armed robbery, right? So usually if you're going to interview someone, you
run
want
them.
to look them up.
Yeah.
More importantly, you don't want to interview them in front of their so-called fiance. You know what you do? You take them down to police headquarters, you put them in that room, you make them sit for an hour, let them think, and then you come in and say this. You don't say, oh, we want to talk to you about a gun used to kill Steve McNair. No, this is what you do. We have physical evidence tying you to the scene of 2 dead bodies. Start talking. Don't say anything about Steve McNair, a gun, Jenny. Boom. We have physical evidence tying you to 2 dead bodies. Start talking. And I guarantee they would have saw the wheels spinning. Oh, God, how can I get out of this? Yeah. But the minute they said, we want to talk to you about a gun used to kill Steve McNair, and then they're like, oh, is this her? Is this Jenny Kazemi? They allowed him to lie.
Well, sure. They gave him the information.
It's like they were giving him an outline.
Yep.
They were telling him what to say. I mean, here you are. You had to go there, Keith, to tell them, hey, I, had a relationship with her for a long time. I can help you. And it didn't even seem like they wanted to know anything about her past. Did they talk to her friends or anyone else?
They had me in that room 3 times. 2 of them you can see on the documentary that was on Netflix. They had me in that room 3 times. And from what I'm understanding, the man that was actually tied to the murder weapon itself was in there, twice? And they treated everyone else like with kid gloves. But then they grill me like crazy when I'm the one who's actually trying to assist. It was insane to me.
Well, the first time they went to Adrian Gilliam's house. The second time after he got arrested, when they went to re-interview him, this is when he's signing his proffer agreement. Why would you let this guy sign a proffer for his, quote, truthful statements? And then he still lied about everything else. And then during that proffer, again, I have the audio of it. You can hear them feeding him the story. Because if you think back, originally, the date of the gun sale was Thursday, July 2nd. And that was because of what one of her managers said. And then once that was contradicted, that's how they were like, oh, it was right after the DUI, blah, blah, blah. Once that was contradicted, when he called them back and said, oh, I was mistaken based on her time card and other things. Oh, crap. What can we do? What can we do? Oh, no, I know what we can do. We can say the gun sale happened Friday. So then that changed from Thursday to Friday. And then during this proffer for his truthful statements, you can hear them say, well, what time did you sell her the gun? What day was it? I don't know what day it was, but whatever day it was around 6 o'clock. His words, again, I can quote it to a T. Well, this was Friday, right? You can hear the detective. Friday, right? I don't know what day. So this was Friday, right? 6 o'clock. So they're feeding him the story to fit their narrative. He never said it was Friday. He never said it was Thursday. If you go back and listen to the very first time they interviewed him, that Sunday, he never said what day it was. Oh, I just sold it to some girl. I don't even know her name. He didn't say it was Thursday. He didn't say it was Friday. He didn't say it was Wednesday. He didn't say it was a month ago. He just said, I sold it to some girl. So what they did, it was Friday, right? Friday, right? You can hear the tap on the table during this proffer agreement. Friday, right? Friday, right? I don't know what day it was, but whatever day it was 6 o'clock. It never happened.
I just have to stop for a second because, the fact that you were on that police department and you work there, so you know these people intimately, you know the system. I just can't for the life of me think that there obviously is a lot more going on internally at that police department to kind of try to sway an investigation to a narrative that would allow them to tie this up into a nice bow very quickly. I mean, what is, and I know this, we've talked to other people, and we're going to be talking to other people who worked at the police department. And, there was someone spoke highly of this one homicide detective, but for the most part, there was I just feel like there's a lot going on here. And, I've been witness to hundreds of homicide investigations, both on tape and both in person. The way you're describing this is most of these homicide investigations that are videotaped like that, you rarely hear the detectives talk. Usually just they're listening and allowing them to talk. And a lot of times then they say, and they've told me in the past, they go, we'll sit there for 10 minutes and not say a word.
Right.
Just to create this
Tension.
uncomfortable void. So this person kind of feels like he's got to say something to help himself.
Right.
And so there's something larger here going on. And I mean, like, you don't want to talk about, and we've dealt with it on a lot of other cases where, some of it is just bad police work, and then some of it can be conspiracy, and some of it conspiracies are born out of incompetence because things aren't done, and then people try to cover it up, the mistakes and stuff like that. But there were no mistakes. They were only on the investigation for a short period of time. It's not like they made any mistakes initially. It sounded like from the get-go they had a plan to do this.
Yeah, so I've pondered on this since 2009 because you're right. I do know the two lead detectives, and although they tried to soil my name, there's a federal lawsuit from a prisoner who said they actually gave false statements that almost got him killed in prison. So if you're talking about soiling a name, go talk to that prisoner who said Norris Tarkenton and Charles Robinson lied essentially on a murder investigation. But I say that to say this. Look, was there pressure from higher ups? No doubt in my mind, right? You had a chief who came in, Ronald Surpass, and started changing the way we do stats. For example, if I was to arrest Keith in a car and he had, say, crack cocaine, weed, some scales, some meth, that's 4 drug arrests. But one drug arrest, because I have one suspect. But when Surpass got there, it's like, no, it's 4 drug arrests. It's charging for the crack, the weed, the scales, the meth. Now our drug arrests have gone up 400%. No, they have not. They're just, fudging the numbers. So, when you have a chief that comes in and is very, very numbers driven and status driven, guys, we got to get this cleared up immediately, right? So let's just call it what it is. Let's call it Occam's razor, and this is the simplest answer. She did it, right? But they can't tell me they were done with their investigation when they were still interrogating people in September. Months later, they're still interrogating people, which they never mentioned, by the way. They never went out and told the media, hey, we're still investigating. But you have supplemental reports from September of 2009. But the murders happened in July of 2009. So if your case is open and shut, as you claim, why are you still interrogating people months later?
Yeah, sounds like CYA, just in case something pops up.
Mm-hmm.
That they didn't.
Who were they interrogating in September?
I'd have to go back and check, but I believe they went and talked to Tony Smith again, who was the guy who shattered Adrian Gilliam's alibi on the night of the murders. I believe they talked to him again. And Keith, didn't they talk to you a couple of months later, if I'm not mistaken?
This podcast is supported by MIDI Health. Are you in midlife, feeling dismissed, unheard, or just plain tired of the old healthcare system? You're not alone. In fact, even today, 75% of women seeking care for menopause and perimenopause issues are left entirely untreated. But it's time for a change. It's time for MIDI. MIDI's not just a healthcare provider. It's a women's telehealth clinic founded and supported by world-class leaders in women's health. Their clinicians provide one-on-one, face-to-face consultations where they truly listen to your unique needs. They offer a full range of holistic, data-driven solutions that isn't one-size-fits-all care. This is care uniquely tailored for you. At MIDI, you will find that their mission is clear: to help all women thrive in midlife, giving them access to the healthcare they deserve. Because they believe midlife isn't the middle at all. It is the beginning of your second act. Ready to feel your best and write your second act script? Visit joinmidi.com today to book your personalized, insurance-covered virtual visit. That's joinmidi.com. MIDI, the care women deserve.
Get ready with me for day 5 of my Pilates challenge and then a casual work from home day. I really want to be comfy today, so I'm going to go with my new Steady State set from Lululemon. I went for the matching hoodie and sweats. I love layering them over workout clothes, especially for early morning classes. The fabric, I believe it's called Superloft, is so soft on the outside and fleecy on the inside. Obsessed. Anyway, that's the vibe for today. See you next time. Shop the new Steady State Superloft now at lululemon.com.
Yeah, they kept in contact for actually quite some time, and I mean, I welcomed it because at the time, you know, I was like, you know, I'm on your team. I want to figure this out, and you know, after that second time that I sat in that interrogation room, they told me to my face before it had ever been told to the public by, I'm not sure if it was the police chief at the time or whoever made the statement. They told me to my face that, look, we looked into it on your side. We know you had nothing to do with this, but we want you to stay in close contact because we want to get any possible information that we can. And then, you know, that's when time had went by for as long as it did. And it's like all these threats coming in. I had to call them and say, hey, since you know this, they need to know it too. And sorry, you know, we're going to end up getting to it. And I'm like, you know, after all this had passed and after me and you had spoke the first time, Vincent, I can't help but think the way that they came at me with this and the way that they looked into me and my background and the way that all of this was put under a microscope on my side, it's like, why didn't they do this with the other people who had much more closer connection to this situation than anyone? It blows my mind. I can't understand why they didn't go into these people instead of going after me the way they did, if they already knew.
I could think of 5 other prime suspects before I would even think about getting to Keith. If I had a top 10 list, Keith would be at number 30. You know what I mean? So why didn't they look at all these other people? You know, you look at the guy who called 911, Robert Gaddy, who ironically had a beef with Steve 2 weeks before, who ironically used to work at the same car lot as Adrian Gilliam. These are not coincidences, right? You look at some other NFL players that had access to that condo that are in Jenny's phone records. You know, maybe they had a beef. Maybe she said something to them that could have gotten her killed. There's a whole slew of people that should have been interrogated much, much deeper and should have been looked at much, much deeper than having Keith in an interrogation room, you know, countless times.
Yeah. So Robert Gaddy, did he have any kind of affiliation with any of the police officers or the infrastructure of the police department at that time? Because I know he was a man about town. Everybody knew who he was. And I'm sure he was working at, you know, he was operating nightclubs and stuff like that. You always when you're dealing with those kind of environments, you're always in contact with police.
Well, he was always in contact with police, but not in a good way. You know, when I was on the department, he owned, I don't know, Club 615, and Keith knows where that is, down right by the stadium. But I mean, we were responding there almost every night for a shooting, a stabbing, you know, a robbery, a fight, right? So yeah, he had an interaction with police, but I don't think it was ever a good one. I don't think, you know, he was buddy particularly with anyone on the police department. You know, I just think this had more to do with, we got to get it, you know, taken care of immediately. And what's so sexy and we always
Yeah.
hear that term in the media. Oh, that's a sexy story. I use it as a reporter anchor now. Oh, this is sexy, right? What's more sexy than you got this beautiful young girl who was spiraling out of control and she killed her millionaire lover, right? Yeah. And we solved it in 4 days. Yeah.
Yeah. So want to get back to a little bit about how you guys connected. And then when, obviously Keith, you probably, when you started talking to Vincent, I'm sure there was kind of an aha moment. It was like, wow, you're like-minded. You guys are both thinking the same. So Keith, you're probably thinking, well, I guess I'm not crazy because someone else who's a legitimate person who used to be a police officer who's looked into this case is, thinking the same thing I am. So when did that happen? When did you guys first meet face to face?
Keith, I'll let you answer that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have spoken about this because we got kind of Vincent's a very busy man. And what I recall is I got an email when he had first started looking into the situation. And I was actually doing my due diligence. And to be quite honest, one of the main reasons why I was doing it was kind of a coping mechanism. I was just deep diving into like any possible research that I could to try and find any kind of details that didn't add up, because I knew what I felt on the inside and I knew that things felt way off. And I wanted to really get to the bottom of it, to find any kind of possible closure that I could. But while I was doing so, I ended up getting an email. It was either an email or a direct message on Facebook at the time or something of the nature.
Facebook, yeah.
Yeah. But he had reached out and said, hey, like, I don't think Jenny did this. And I know that you didn't do this either. I would really like to talk to you. Now, I sat on this message for what felt like a while for me. It might not have been, but I decided to reach back out. Yeah. But I decided to reach back out. And from what I recall, we met and sat down at a table for what was like a lunch meeting. Now, it was quick, but he laid it all out and was like, this is why, this. And I'm sitting there just astonished by what I'm seeing. And then to hear the fact that he's not only a police officer, but he was tied to this unit and he's conducting a private investigation and has much more detail than I could possibly ever imagine to have. And while he's laying this all out on the table for me, I'm just like, that was what solidified it in my mind right there. I'm like, now I know. It's like, now I can peacefully lock in and completely defend her the way that I know that I feel like I need to on the inside. So that's when we met. And then we ended up having multiple follow-ups after the fact. And I mean, we're here today. So ever since that moment, we've been in close contact.
Yeah.
What do you remember about that first meeting, Vincent?
It pretty much went down like that. I know I had reached out to so many people. Again, this is 2009, so this is long before the advent of how social media is now. So the only thing we really had was like a Facebook, or I think MySpace was still a thing then. So I reached out to Keith. I reached out to Azadeh, who's Jenny's sister, who I just spoke with the other day, actually. Reached out to a bunch of people, Steve's mother. And, for me, at first I was thinking, well, maybe I am crazy. But, when I take emotion out of it and start using logic, I'm like, no, I'm not crazy. And, one of the things that stuck out in that meeting was Keith's belief that she didn't do this. And here's why she didn't do this. And then when I met Lucille, who's Steve's mom, when she told me, I don't believe this little girl did this. And then when Lucille met with Nashville police and they went over the crime scene pictures, which they showed her like 2 pictures. And, she basically told me, hey, yeah, they lied to me. Steve was found with, they say $7. She's like, you mean 7,000, right? No, ma'am, $7. She was like, well, who robbed my son? Because my son has not had $7 since he was, a player at Alcorn State, So when you look at stuff like that, I know I'm on the right track, right? I know Jenny didn't steal his money. She's laying on the floor next to him dead. Somebody stole his money. Someone stole his Rolex that wasn't on his wrist, right? All of this stuff. Someone turned the lights off after they were dead. She didn't do it, right? Because if you go back and listen to Wayne Neely, when he walked in at 1:30 in the afternoon and the shades were drawn, if the lights were on, he would have been able to see perfectly fine. So, like, how did he walk in, walk to the kitchen, not see two dead bodies, get a beer, and then turn around? Oh, my God, there's two dead bodies there, right? So all of this stuff, you know, like Keith said, at first you're like, man, maybe I'm not right. Maybe, but no, like, he's right. I'm right. The only people that are wrong are the people that told the world this is murder-suicide.
Yeah. So you're telling me that he always wore a Rolex and that Rolex was missing?
It's not listed on the property report, right?
And it wasn't at his other residence or anything?
If it was never mentioned. There's a few things that even, again, Lucille and all the people that went to see those crime scene photos when they met with Nashville police, even though they told them I couldn't be in the room, but you got to question that, right? Like, because if your case is solid and, you know, you want to just ruin my name, why not let me in the room to review these crime scene photos? You know, they've asked, like, hey, where's his watch? Where's his ring? Where's this? It's not here. Like, you know, where's Steve's money? $7? You're talking about a guy that was worth millions and he's got $7. I'm worth thousands, and on a good day, I'm gonna have at least $20 or $30. You know what I mean? So it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It's just so bizarre. It's just like, I mean, we've seen, you know, police investigations go awry like this and before, but this seems a little bit different. This seems more like there's a level of orchestration going on here that is uncommon. You know, especially, you know, and it's hard for us to believe that just the fact that he was a famous person, an athlete in the town, that's what it, because this also happens to people that aren't famous.
Yeah, we have a case that we're working on in
Right
Oklahoma
now.
that it's the same. There was a boy that was there at the party where they believe he was murdered, and he had to go to police. They didn't come to him.
He had to give him,
and they
phone.
didn't question or interrogate the 50 people that were at that party. There's still people on that list that have never been spoken to, and we're talking 2 years later. So this pattern
of cherry picking
who you're going to talk to, we've seen before. I'm just surprised in a case this high profile that this would happen, because it is under a microscope, and people like yourself, Vincent, they're going to look into this. You know, Keith, you're not going to let it go either, and I'm sure her family feels the same.
They aren't letting it go.
Well, I'm not surprised, again, simply because it was Steve McNair. And if you go back to that day, and Keith can attest to this, hundreds of people flocked down to that condo. Just pull up the pictures from that day. You see this large crowd standing outside this condo where this happened, behind the crime scene tape. People wanted answers right then. Right. So by 8 o'clock that night, Don Aaron, the PIO for the department, is telling everyone we're not looking for any suspects. Right. Because, again, we want answers right now. Who killed Steve? We want these answers. By 8 o'clock, we're not looking for any suspects. Really? Like, how? Like, okay, there's a gun at the scene. There's two dead people. Doesn't mean it's a murder-suicide. If I want to throw out that red herring to make it look like it, I'm going to leave this gun here. And if I'm the killer whose alibi was shot by the guy whose house I said I was at, knowing this gun's not registered in my name, I might be safe to leave this gun here. They'll never figure it out. Oops, they figured it out. Now I got to make up some bullshit story to say, yes, my gun, but I sold it.
Yeah. Were there any signs of struggle at all between the two?
No. And here's the thing too, right? If you go back and listen to Sergeant Pistiglione, he made this stupid comment. Well, she texted Steve a few days before that I'm going to have all you soon. So we knew that meant she was going to kill him. Well, first they took that out of context, because if you look at the entire text thread, and again, I have the records. It went like this. Jenny texted him, "I love you." I love you too, baby. That's Steve's response. "I'm going to have all of you soon." Yes, you will. We're adults here. Everyone on this call is an adult. We know what that meant. They were about to have a booty call. That did not mean she was going to kill him. I've gotten those texts. I'm sure Keith has gotten those texts. I'm sure Rob, Cindy's probably sent you those texts. We know what that means, right? So to say, oh, yeah, she was going to kill him based on those texts, no. And then you got to look at Jenny goes to work that day. She tells Steve she was going to go to the apartment first, her apartment. Then she tries to get Steve to go out to have drinks that night. So if you're talking about a girl who supposedly bought a gun at 6 o'clock, why at 10:15 after Lucretia cancels on her because they were going to go hang out and watch fireworks, does she say, you know what, I'm going to text the guy I'm going to later kill tonight to go out and have drinks because I want to have one more good time before I kill him. And then I'll go even further than that. There's music playing upstairs. Jenny's in a bra and panties. Steve gets there at 1:30 in the morning. So again, we know what was about to happen. This was not a girl that was about to freaking shoot Steve 4 times, once in each temple, let that sink in, and then twice in the chest from a girl who never owned a gun before, never picked one up, and supposedly bought one at 6 o'clock that night. Now she's this trained assassin and then kills herself. Her being in a bra and panties with music playing, again, we're adults in this room. We know exactly what was going to happen that night. So no, there was no signs of a struggle. In fact, I had a buddy who retired from the department who got a chance to see the crime scene photos. He called me and he said, Vince, he said, that is the most staged crime scene I've ever seen. He was like, I said, what do you mean? He's like, it was almost like someone painted a picture. It was so perfect. Nothing was out of place. No furniture was moved. There was no signs of a fight, all of this stuff. But what did police say? Oh, well, Steve was asleep when he got shot because he was very highly intoxicated. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I've been around the McNair boys. They will drink you under the table and still be able to walk a straight line. And anybody that knew Steve knew he could handle his liquor. So for them to say, well, he was drunk, that's why he was asleep. Again, bullshit.
Yeah. Did they find the wounds to the head and also to the chest? Was there any stippling? What was the proximity from the gun? Did they find, was it a close range? Because, you know, if it was put up to his head or close to his head, you're going to have stippling.
There was only one that was close. I can't remember which, but I do remember, I'd have to go back and look at the TBI report, but I do remember one distinct thing. They said that Jenny, you know, stood over Steve while he was asleep and did this. But one of the headshots, and I believe it was to the left, entered at an upward angle, which is not really possible if she's standing over Steve while he's sitting on the couch to shoot at an upward angle. And here's what I've always said. After Jenny was dead or right before she was dead, because, again, you look at the autopsy, she had rug burn to her left side of her body, her legs, her arms. I believe she was drugged. Someone put that gun in her hand while she's on her knees, fired that shot into Steve, and then killed her. That would explain why that bullet entered at an upward angle. Because if their story is true and she's standing over Steve, now I know she was short, but again, Steve's sitting down. There's no way that bullet enters at an upward angle without some assistance. And I've said to this day, and I'll say it to the day I leave this earth, especially based on the carpet burn that was on Jenny, that she was drugged to that spot. Someone put a gun in her hand. She's only this big. It's not inconceivable. And the mob has been doing that for hundreds of years, right? Making things look like a murder-suicide. Someone put that gun in her hand and fired that shot to Steve before they killed her.
Yeah. I mean, Keith, I mean, you talk about how she didn't even want a gun in your apartment just for protection. No. I mean, the fact that she's that skilled.
It's impossible because I'll tell you this. I never wanted guns either. And he made me go to a firing range. And that gun was very difficult for me to handle. And that was after being taught by a professional for several days.
I guarantee, Sydney, the first time you pulled that trigger, you're probably shaking in your boots, weren't you?
I was. My hands were shaking, and I was very nervous.
Exactly.
And my bullet went flying off in another direction than where it was supposed to go.
Right.
And to be honest, like even if something happened right now, I wouldn't know what to do with that gun.
Right.
Like,
So-
you have to learn how to use a gun. You can't just suddenly become this professional assassin who can put 2 bullets in a grown NFL player's head. It just doesn't make any sense.
So take into account you were shaking at a gun range. Imagine what she would have been doing. And then
Not in her bra and panties?
Yeah. And then I'll go one further. Let's say, because it was a off-brand Bryco Jennings 9mm, and those things are pieces of crap anyway. They're notorious for jamming. So let's say she fires her first shot, misses Steve, then it jams all of a sudden. Then Steve's like, what the heck are you doing? Then he grabs his gun and shoots her. Or she shoots him once, he's not dead, and then it jams. But she never held a gun before in her life. Oh, God, what do I do now? Oh, God, what do I do now? She runs out of there, Steve dies. Then Adrian Gilling can come in and get the reward money that they would put up for the person who killed Steve McNair, right? Because she's going to flip out and not know what to do. Like, I've shot guns probably the last, I don't want to date myself, let's just say 30 plus years, right? I don't think I could bring myself to shooting someone once in the temple, twice in the chest, and I'm certified I can hit you from 300 yards with a rifle, right? So this little girl who had just turned 20, all of a sudden, because she's mad, is going to shoot this guy. And again, let's talk mad, especially for a 20-year-old female. Keith, let me ask you this. If Jenny was mad at you and you guys were texting back and forth, you knew it, right?
Yeah. Oh, there was no question. I mean, she was very vocal about how she was feeling emotionally. If it was happy, if it was sad, if it was mad, I knew. And there was no question. She didn't play like these, subtle mind games with you. She let you know up front, which is one of the reasons why our relationship lasted as long as it did. But the thing is, I want to bring up a couple of points as well. Is, one being to the fact that, this whole narrative that she was in this down spiral and she had, lost herself because of what was going on with McNair and everything like that. Me and Vincent have talked about this numerous times. McNair was not the only man that she was talking to and dating. She was talking to numerous men at the time. She was living life as a young single female in downtown Nashville. She had options. So for them to say, oh, well, this particular one didn't work out, so she lost her mind, killed him, and then killed herself, that doesn't add up to me. Right. Not only that, but also the forensic side of things. Me and Vince have talked about this as well. The minor traces of gunpowder residue that was found on her hand. Minor traces after that many shots?
5 shots.
I mean, come on now. Minor traces. If you fire a gun that many times, go back and look in history. How many times are you going to find minor traces on the assailant's hand? You're not. Yeah. It's going to be everywhere, all over you. And me and Vincent has talked about this as well. And I mean, he can confirm better than I have. But what I've heard numerous times is the fact that the minor trace of gunpowder that was found on her hand did not add up to the actual entry wound that took her life. Because if she fired the gun on herself, it would have been the opposite side, meaning she would have had to wrap her hand around to take her own life like this. Now, again, go back and look historically and try your best to find me someone who has ever taken their life in that manner.
No, my cousin was found in what they called a murder-suicide, and they said the same thing. They said that he wrapped his hand around his head like this. Well, it's just not. There's just, to me, I never believe that.
Even in the moment of death, we do what's natural to us, right? I'm right-handed, so if I was to shoot myself right now, I'm picking the gun up with my right hand. I'm not going to my left. I'm not doing this. And I want to touch on what Keith was saying about the gunshot residue. If you go back and watch a gunshot in slow motion, there's this big cloud, gunpowder. Watching in slow motion, you can Google it, YouTube it. The amount of gunshot residue that would have been on Jenny. Again, she's in a bra and panties. It would have been on her stomach. It would have been a blah, blah, blah. It would have, And you have to take into account, too, the FBI itself stopped using gunshot residue as an investigative tool years ago because it's inconclusive. If I shoot a gun right now and I hand it to someone, guess what they're going to have on their hand? Gunshot residue.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if the FBI is not using this as an investigative tool, why the hell is Nashville police using that as their conclusion to, yeah, she did it. She had a minute trace. I think they said dime-size amount of gunshot residue on her hand. Well, she would, first of all, have way more gunshot residue. You're talking 5 shots, 4 to Steve and 1 to her. She would have way more gunshot residue. Again, it goes back to if I shoot a gun and I put it in someone's hand, they're going to have gunshot residue on their hand. And it goes back to what I was saying, that I believe she was being held down on the carpet and someone put a gun in her hand and fired that shot. That would match that quote-unquote dime-size amount of gunshot residue. And I also want to go back to the text messages. Like Keith was saying, like, you knew when Jenny was mad. Where the heck are the text messages from Jenny to Steve that, oh, you motherfucker, you're cheating on me. Oh, you motherfucker, you're leaving me. Oh, you motherfucker, I can't stand you. Oh, like, this is a girl that supposedly, allegedly shot him 4 times. And don't you think if Steve thought anything was strange that night, he wouldn't have gone to that condo? Like, you cannot hide that much anger. She couldn't even do it with Keith, but you're telling me she hid it from a guy she allegedly shot 4 times, execution style? Like, I've been married twice. I've had a few relationships since then. When there's text messages, when there's, as we say, in our feelings, oh, you're going to fucking know about it, especially from a woman. Like,
oh, yeah, for
so
sure.
Where are these texts from Jenny to Steve to say, oh, you son of a bitch. Oh, I'm going to kill you. Oh, motherfucker. I can't. Like, no.
Yeah, there was nothing escalated. There was no buildup. And, as we know, in relationships like that, nothing just comes out of the blue. I mean, you're going to have some sort of buildup. And, if they were texting, most of their communication when they were away from each other was texting and not on the phone, talking to each other, you're gonna see that escalation.
And also, wouldn't she have told her friends, Keith? Wouldn't she complain about it to her friends and say, oh, this is what's going on? I can't imagine if she was that vocal that she just kept quiet with her girlfriends, right? She's going to tell them.
Well, also, I would like to add as well, at the time, again, I was in and out of her apartment at that time. We were casually dating, going out, still communicating. Again, she had multiple options. She even came to my apartment, which this is on record. She came to my apartment and she posted all her furniture from her apartment on Craigslist to sell that night because she was planning on moving out, and even sarcastically joked with me when she came to my apartment. She was looking around on the staircase and she's like, I like this. I think I could work with this. Now, mind you, I loved that idea because I was still in love with her at the time. But she was keeping her options open. And I mean, the fact of the matter is that while they were trying to spin this narrative that, this was her only option, McNair was just it, and she had no other way to go. And if it fell through, she had, nothing to fall back on. That's insane, because even me and Vincent Hill had talked about this, and he brought this to the table. She had thousands of dollars in her account at the time of her passing.
Yeah.
So,
Steve had given her $2,000 earlier that day, and then 12 hours later, they're dead. And to go back to what Keith was saying about posting the furniture, I know Nashville police tried to use that to say, see, this proves she was suicidal. Well, if I'm going to kill myself, what the hell am I going to use the money for selling my furniture, first of all? But secondly, that was on a Wednesday, I believe. She had gotten the key from Steve, who had told her, well, you could just move into the condo if you want. And police interviewed several of Jenny's friends who told them, yeah, Steve gave her a key that day and told her to move in the condo. So if I'm moving into a fully furnished condo that I'm going to live rent-free, essentially, the hell do I need my furniture for? So, of course, I'm going to put it on Craigslist to sell it. But what did Nashville police do? Well, she put her furniture on Craigslist, so that proves she was suicidal. I've never known anyone to commit suicide. It's like, man, I got to sell this furniture first. I got to get my life in order before I kill myself.
That's ridiculous. And also, he gave her a key that day.
Well, it was Wednesday. She got the key from Steve Wednesday because that night she went out with a friend. I don't want to put his name into this.
Okay.
But she went out with a friend who told police, yeah, we went out to dinner. She told me Steve gave her a key to the condo and was like, oh, you can move here in here, because I think this was around the time when her roommate was still contemplating whether she was going to stay in Pennsylvania, come back to Nashville. So it was like, okay, well, that's an easy out. Like he said, she had options, right? Well, if Steve's going to let me live here, essentially, what the hell do I need my furniture for? So I'm going to just sell it. It makes
So if
perfect
he was
sense.
going to let her live there, why would she kill him?
My point exactly.
That makes no sense.
But if the public's not made aware of this, then what are they going to believe? Oh, yeah,
Right.
she was worried
Well,
Steve was leaving. She was worried Steve was going to leave her, and it was her only option, so she had to do something. Yeah, no, she had options. She had a key to that fucking condo, which she was going to move into it. In fact, the day of the murders, that Friday morning, Steve texted her and said, hey, I came by the condo earlier. You weren't there. You know what she responded with? Yeah, I had to go to the T-Mobile store to get my phone fixed. So again, that goes back to, well, if she was worried Steve was leaving, why is Steve texting her saying, hey, you weren't at the condo? Where were you?
Sounds more like he was worried that she was leaving.
No, it was just like, hey, I came by,
No, I know, but what I'm saying, it sounds
there.
like he was paying attention to where she was. Like this
Right.
didn't sound like a guy that's breaking up with you. Guy is breaking up with you. He doesn't care where you are. He doesn't want you anywhere near him.
He doesn't give a shit where you
No,
are. Right?
he cares where she is. He's not breaking up with her. That makes no
Right.
sense.
And
she's still keeping you on the hook because
But
she's
if-
20
if
and she
people
was
knew
her
this-
safety net. So,
Right.
you know.
But if people knew this, then they're going to question, well, was this really a murder-suicide? So if we say things like, well, she texted him that I'm going to have all you soon, so she was going to kill him. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. But if they put all the text messages in there and all the, oh, you got the key. Oh, I came by the condo. You weren't there. Oh, man, maybe this wasn't a murder-suicide. So, of course, they're going to keep it quiet.
My question is, Vincent, why is it only you and Keith that are still looking into this?
I don't think it's just us per se. Well, I would say looking into it, yes. Investigating like every angle, yes. But here we are, how many years later?
Exactly.
And we're still talking about it. So that means there's a ton of unanswered questions that I think people want to know the answers to. If this was OJ and Nicole, we know what happened there. Did he beat a murder charge? Yeah. But did he kill Ron and Nicole? Yeah.
Right.
It's open and shut, right? Is this a robbery gone bad where you caught the gunman on surveillance video? No. Those are open and shut cases. But when you have all of these unanswered questions, people are going to question it forever,
Yeah. Well, when you were, I know you had kind of like a interesting experience as a Nashville cop. Did you see anything untoward while you were there that kind of made you raise your eyebrow and said, "Listen, this is not copacetic here"?
As far as with the case,
just like anything, like an investigation, you showed up on something. You may not have been the primary, but you showed up and you started looking, and that someone was trying to rubber stamp just to get a collar and conviction.
Not really. Not that I can recall. I can recall there were some shady characters that are now in prison for doing stuff they shouldn't have done. There is a guy that's in prison right now for shooting his wife in the head with his service gun and saying it was a suicide. He was a Nashville cop.
Oh, wow. Oh, my God.
Yeah. So, there were some things that happened there. Some guys I even went to the academy with are now locked up for doing some shady stuff, but nothing like that. I do recall a funny story with, and I may have shared this on a previous episode, Charles Robinson and Norris Tarkington, the two lead detectives on Jenny and Steve's case. They called me one day because I had a reputation of, if you need to find someone, call Vince, he'll find them, right? Stolen cars, wanted people, whatever. So they were like, hey, we're looking for this guy, wanted for murder, blase, blase. show me his picture. I'm like, cool, let's go. So go to the house, knock on the door. They're the detectives. I'm just a patrol guy. I'm letting them leave. And it's the guy, like, plain as day. They're like, hey, we're looking for whatever his name is. Oh, that's my cousin. I don't know where he is, blah, blah, blah. All right, here's my card. So they hand them the card and leave. And I'm like, hey, guys, that's him. They're like, nah, the guy we're looking for has braids. It's like, well, if I was wanted for murder and my mugshot had braids, do you think I'd cut my hair? It's like, nah, that's not him. I was like, did you see the mole? Because he had this distinct mole, like right here. It's like, that's fucking him. So they run up, back up to the door, knock on the door. I'm like, he's not going to answer the door. He opens the door. They're like, dude, why'd you lie to us? It's like, oh, man. So it was the guy they were looking for. So fast forward to 2009, and this is a true story, whether they want to admit it or not. Fast forward to 2009, they're the lead detectives on this high-profile national case of a freaking NFL star. And these are the same guys. Again, don't take my word for it. I got receipts for everything. Go look it up. I'm like 50 cents. Go look it up. There is a lawsuit federally where a prisoner said they lied on their investigation to make their narrative fit in a homicide that almost got him killed in prison. But these are the lead detectives on Steve and Jenny's case. But they want to soil my name. Okay.
Yeah. Wow. Well, guys, this is obviously, there's still so much more to talk about. Vincent, I'd love to, like, offline here, talk about maybe going over some of those records and stuff like that we can kind of bring onto the podcast to really illustrate what we're all talking about, what you're revealing. Because, I mean, we've been doing this a long time, investigating cold cases and listen, we're super pro police. A lot of our friends are police, U.S. Marshals.
Well, that's the thing. Like, one of our friends is a CSI expert, and she taught us this a long time ago, that you have to look at a case. You have to look at the totality of it all. Like you're saying, Vincent, they're taking things out of context. They're taking out little nuggets that they want to just focus on so that they can push their narrative. And you can't look at a case like that. You have to look at all of these pieces. She wasn't suicidal. She was very vocal about her feelings. There were text messages. There were witnesses. Like, all of these things, when you put these pieces together, Keith had an alibi. That's where you build a case. You don't build a case with just little nuggets that you want to push to kind of create something to fit into a box and tie it up with a bow.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest problem with this case.
Yeah.
And then, we as squirrel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, like you talked about the OJ case earlier. It's like, here's the thing. It's like they spent a lot of time investigating that case. Okay. Even though it didn't look good for OJ, people were still on the fence until, even up until the glove didn't fit and you must have quit. I mean, it's like, that was like, even though you could have a variety of reasons why his glove didn't fit, the glove like that. So there's like, and he was super high profile. They wanted a resolution there too, very quickly. But it's with this, it just doesn't seem like it just wasn't properly investigated. Things weren't vetted out. It seemed like there obviously was pressure from either politically or from the brass at the police department, and who knows, maybe even the NFL, because because they've been kind of tight-lipped about this as well. They were happy to basically get this thing done. I know Buzz Cook, his agent. I mean, we haven't spoken to him yet. We're going to reach out to him. He's probably not going to want to talk about this either. I'll be lucky if I can get him on. And I've dealt with him before on another series I used to do where I used to get NFL athletes on our show, Sports Science, and so I was talking to all these agents, and he was so I've spoken to him. So, but I guarantee you, he's not going to want to talk about this, but I'm going to talk to other agents and see what their feeling is, because it's definitely something that all these agents at some point, they're going to deal with something hopefully not as tragic like this,
right? But
they're going to have clients, they're going to have problems. It's just the history of the NFL, and when you have these just alpha males who are giving tons of money to play a game and with no basically guardrails on how they should behave. And obviously most of them, 90% of them, behave properly, but you got a good chunk of percentage of them that, you know, we see it every day in the headlines. Something happening
But Steve was such a hero, and I think that they wanted to make it that let's just get this done now. Done, finished. Murder, suicide, jealous girlfriend. That's it.
Yeah.
And that way they could just move on from it, because he was such a hero, especially in that town. You know, it rocked that town.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
and if I may, I wanted to follow up briefly on what you had asked Vincent about what, you know, drives us both to continue on to look further into this. Not only the fact that I have it, you know, deep down inside of me that I wholeheartedly believe that she is completely innocent and that they were both murdered. There were actually things that occurred with me personally during this time frame that stood out to me, that this information was provided to the police department. Things such as what had happened and transpired at her apartment with the silver car, the two men coming in and out. But the night of July 2nd, the night of the DUI, how that was handled. Then also that same night, and me and Vincent has talked about this many times, I was at my apartment that night after trying to assist in that situation and get her Escalade from being towed. When I went downtown and had an interaction with the cop that pulled them both over, I actually came back home, met up with a girl that I was talking to at the time, and she was staying over and watching a movie with me when someone showed up to my apartment in the middle of the night, banging on my door and trying to break in. That was provided to the police as well. And this ironically happened this time frame, 2 days beforehand. And nobody ever followed up on that. And then, you know, I communicate this to the police department numerous times, but somebody tried to come to my apartment and break in, and there was an eyewitness there that also provided this information as well, the girl that was there with me. That was never followed up on. So, I mean, there's just many things that drive me in this direction to try and get to the bottom of it, because if they were both murdered the way that I believe that they were, then that means the true person that is responsible is still out there. And that's an uneasy feeling, because I mean, I'm far removed from the situation, but I also have children. I also still live in the area, you know. So.
It's a good point. It's a good point. When these things happen and the person that didn't actually do it is not apprehended, they're still in the community, and people should be concerned about that. Mm-hmm. They should be concerned that there's a murderer potentially running around.
Yep.
Yeah.
And really quick, for me, why I continue to do this, look, I made a promise to two families, and I'm not talking over email, I'm not talking in a letter. I sat down and I looked Lucille McNair in the eye, and I told her I wouldn't stop till I found out what happened to her son. And on the same note, I told Jenny's sister Azadeh when she came to Nashville the exact same thing, that I wouldn't stop until I found out what happened to her sister, you know. And you know, if it's 10 years from now, if it's 20 years from now, if it's 30 years from now, there's no statute of limitation on murder.
Nope.
And I'll continue to push for this until something happens.
And we'll be right there along with you guys. So appreciate your time. And
Thank you.
Once again, obviously, we're definitely going to be talking to you again. But so thanks for this. And then I'd love to dive into some of those records and some of those testimonies, because I think, I mean, just from you, first blush, it just sounds ridiculous. I mean, because Cindy's dealt with this on even when she was in high school. She had a friend of hers who was senior year in high school, was basically convicted of killing both of his parents, and the cops basically kept him there for like 24 hours, interrogated him, 17-year-old kid, and basically wrote out a statement for him, and they said, well, if you sign this, you can go home now.
You can go home.
18 years he spent in prison before they found the murder weapon.
Oldest trick in the book. If you sign
and it was a private investigator who found the murder weapon. It wasn't the police.
Nope.
The police department, buried this. They didn't want anything, they said he's guilty. He's going to jail. He was 17 years old, spent 18 years in prison. And a private investigator hired by, him from prison, found the murder weapon.
And they later found out the investigating detective was in on it.
Wow.
Oh, you'll have to text me this name. I want to look this case up.
Marty Tankliff. Marty Tankliff.
It's Long Island, New York. Port Jefferson, Long Island.
Yeah. And now he's out of prison now. He's a lawyer, and now he's helping other people wrongfully convicted.
Wow, good for him.
Yeah.
That's
We
amazing.
did a documentary on him. He's amazing.
Yeah.
That's
But
awesome.
that's the thing. It's like these things happen,
Oh yeah.
especially in high-profile cases. And it was a high-profile case in Port Jefferson where I grew up because Marty's father was very wealthy and owned a lot of businesses. People knew him. And even if it's someone that's not nationally known in that community, they knew
Well, it was
him.
national. It was on Oprah. It
I
was
know
like
later.
crazy.
But
Yeah.
what I'm saying is with Steve McNair, I could see why they would want to button it up very quickly. But at the same time, people are like yourself, you're not going to let it go. So why would you not? Just to be completely transparent and
Right.
unturn every stone. That part makes no sense to me at all.
What we learned, we did a whole documentary on wrongful convictions with Georgetown University, investigating 5 cases, and we ended up getting someone out of prison after 8 months. But the consistency was that when the legal system, they're all about finality. So when there's a final decision, and when that decision is made, they don't want to go back and look at it again, ever. You know, they're going to.
But how did they even jump to that decision? Because from what you're saying, there was nothing. There was no forensic evidence to suggest that this was a murder-suicide. Correct?
I mean, they had the gun there. They had 2 dead bodies. That's about
That's it.
as you can get, I guess, in their mind.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll definitely more to dig into, and we'd love to bring our friend who's a CSI specialist and have you talk to them too, Vincent, and just really, I don't know if you know who Cheryl McCollum is.
Oh, I know Cheryl really well. Yeah.
Yeah, she's great.
She's a good friend of ours. So she's helping us with a bunch of cases. All right, gentlemen. Well, listen, you guys have a wonderful holiday. Thank you so much for sharing your time and all your passion about this case. It's fascinating, and hopefully we can kind of, if anything, just keep it in the eye, because I think it needs to be in the public eye.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Thank you both.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Y'all have a good one.
You too.